Something that admittedly I've struggled with as a new dad throughout my wife's pregnancy and into the postpartum period is knowing how to show up the best way I can for my wife, to support her the way that she and baby need, and to be helpful. So let's talk about it. Firstly, as new dads, let's just be honest with ourselves. No matter how motivated we are to help, in the grand scheme we have it pretty easy. But that doesn't mean that we can and should be useless. In fact, I strongly believe that baby and mum's health and well-being, especially in this postpartum period, depend heavily on us dads to play an active, present role. So with that, how I've reconciled my role as a supportive partner to my wife during these early postpartum days is 1, be empathetic to and acknowledge mum's struggle. 2, do everything I can to lighten my wife's mental and physical burden. And 3, be my wife's advocate. So number 1, acknowledging everything that my wife has had to overcome during her pregnancy and afterwards. As a man, I can't even begin to imagine the physical, emotional, and mental trauma that Jojo had to go through. Physically, you've got cramping, back pain, morning sickness, sleeplessness from being in a constant state of discomfort and carrying the weight of this child, not to mention the physical trauma of having your cervix dilate from the size of a Cheerio to that of a cantaloupe. Emotionally, she's got huge swings in hormones that are totally out of her control. And then this doesn't stop post-pregnancy. The massive changes in hormones like estrogen and progesterone and oxytocin, HCG, are compounded by childbirth and milk production. In a time when physical recovery from childbirth is so crucial, sleep is incredibly hard fought, especially if you decide to breastfeed or to pump like Jojo has. Add on top of that the feeling of isolation. One of our friends who also recently had a kid, we think put it really well. Childbirth is like finishing your first marathon. As you cross that finish line and are basking in the glory of what you've just created, then someone taps you on the shoulder and is like, hey, you ready for the triathlon? And you don't even know how to swim. This is what our supermums are up against. And as dads, we can only try to understand and empathize. Since we're not in their shoes, this leads me to number 2, which is to make sure that all of their physical needs are met and that we're doing all we can to lighten their physical and mental burden. I'll admit that this has been a learning process. Physically, rest and recovery after birth is so incredibly important, and this means sleep, managing pain like headaches or backaches. At minimum, ensuring that she is well nourished and hydrated, so making sure that there is water nearby, that some of her favorite snacks are within reach whenever she wants them. Secondly, it's provided Jojo some measure of relief to receive massages, whether it's in her feet, her calves, her back, or her breasts if they're feeling engorged from breastfeeding and pumping. And then when it comes to sleep management, which I think is the biggest opportunity for us as dads to lean in, because from our experience, this is probably one of the toughest challenges for us to figure out at first. I think it's so important for you and your partner to try to figure out a routine that works for you. Which feedings will we each take at night? How can we line that up to her pumping schedule as best we can? And to get to where we are, it did take a bit of trial and error. But as we slowly find our groove and are feeling gradually more and more rested, I can't emphasize this one enough. Now, in terms of providing emotional support, caveated again with the fact that every mum is different, I think it starts with understanding her preferences and needs. It's important for me to remember as a dad that Jojo is going through an incredibly heightened emotional state, combating an internal hormonal warfare in a state of sleep deprivation that she has never experienced before. In that context, sometimes the best thing to do is for us dads not to try to problem solve everything. Whatever Jojo or your partners express to you as being their goals and preferences, like I want to have a longer shower or I want to rest between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the least we can do is respect, accommodate, and encourage them. Be empathetic to mum. Give grace. Things will slip through the cracks or get lost in mistranslation. That's okay. Just try to communicate openly with your partner because you're in this together. And as a dad, it's impossible for you to fully appreciate all that she is going through. Another thing I'm certainly guilty of is saying platitudes like, what are you talking about? You look beautiful. When in reality, she doesn't feel beautiful. Encourage her to occasionally step outside and get some sunlight, or to go for a walk with you around the block. What I've found is that postpartum care can often feel quite repetitive, and it can help break up the routine. Give her treats, something to look forward to. And don't forget to make time to nurture your relationship and to be affectionate with mum. When baby is asleep, cuddle. Let her know that you're there for her. And then finally, if the going gets tough, do look out for signs of postpartum depression. In Jojo's case, this might look like lethargy or crying more than usual, feeling of guilt or failure over things like breastfeeding. I think our role here as the dad is just to be empathetic, to give grace, to be vigilant, and take off as much of the mental burden as you can. And this one has been huge for me and Jojo. And what it means is not coming to her with problems or questions that I can find the answer to myself. For example, instead of asking, is there anything I can do? Maybe just thinking about what it is that could make her feel better, or presenting her with options. Another example would be asking mum, where can I find X, Y, Z? Instead, just look first and proactively be an active participant in the nesting process so that you know where everything is ahead of time. Before baby comes, invest the time and the effort to learn how to use the sterilizer or the formula machine or the baby monitor, and to set things up so that you're not scrambling once baby arrives. Last but not least, advocate for your wife. In our situation, that means being informed, asking the right questions to the OB-GYN or the pediatrician, and when family, I love them, come to you with unsolicited advice, knowing when and how to push back in a way that doesn't create even more stress for your wife. Because at the end of the day, as mum and dad, you are the ultimate decision makers and are accountable for your baby's well-being. If your first few weeks after baby arrives are anything like ours, it can be really difficult when you yourself are sleep deprived and trying to figure things out to support your wife in the best way possible. No one wants to see their partner endure so much physical, mental, and emotional discomfort. But at the very least, playing a present and active role, being a constant source of support, knowing what's expected of you, communicating with your wife, taking off as much of the burden as you can, and going into this next chapter of your life with eyes wide open. Dads, you can do this.